Welcome to Funny They Don't Look Jewish, where Judaism appears in the panels. Our purpose is to find characters, stories, and issues of comics that explore explicitly Jewish content. I'm Brandon Bernstein.
I'm Henry Bernstein.
No relation.
We
Nice.
did it well that time.
That was pretty good, Henry. It turns out using one mic, we can actually speak at the same time. Good to see you, man, and it's good to
See
be
you.
back.
Welcome back to half of Funny You Don't Look Jewish headquarters.
Yeah,
The
great. I
other
think this
half,
is the only real headquarters. Mine was always like,
Plaza.
in exile or in mobile operations, but never a headquarters.
So you have been redeemed, returned back to Chicago into
Yes,
my Jewish home.
exactly, exactly. Great to be here.
Last time
Yeah,
we talked about The Thing, which was
we got to have some
fantastic.
emergency Pano that was fun to revisit our favorite Jewish character and
Yeah.
go like hardy into the Marvel characters. Yeah, and this time we're actually getting ready to do something that we have never done before. We're going to take our first little baby steps outside of both the Marvel and DC universe.
Now, Brandon, what is your personal comic history with the universes outside of Marvel
Oh,
and
I'm so
DC?
glad you asked that. What a fun question. Yeah, I mean, so growing up as a kid of the 90s, my first taste of it was just seeing things in like Wizard magazine, right? So I would get, for anyone listening who didn't know or who was younger, Wizard magazine was the guide to comics that would come out every month and it would be full of, before the internet, it was like a magazine that was full of previews of what was coming and fan casting for superhero movies that we had no idea the ones that were going to be coming our way at the
Right.
time and all that. So Wizard would often point out both the big Marvel and DC books, but it would occasionally have like this comic at Dark Horse or this comic, or like Kurt Busiek is writing Astro City. So I'd hear about all these comics that were independent that I knew about that sort of built up a reputation. But the first time I ever remember reading comics that were outside Marvel and DC was probably in 10th grade, because in
Hmm.
10th grade, my dad took me, he was a bus driver down in LA, and so he took me to the Valley to this place that he found, and there was a comic book store there that was much cooler than the comic book store in the suburb where I grew up, and that was the first place that I remember buying because I'd heard good things. Like I think I got an early volume of Powers by Brian Michael Bendis, and
Hmm.
I got what else? I think that's when I first got Mouse volumes one and two, and
Hmm.
some other indie stories like a Sin City volume
Hmm.
from Frank Miller, and those were some of my earliest ones. Really, I would mostly get sort of trade paperbacks and classic stories that were already proven. And then I think sometime in 2011 is when I first started actually collecting some Dark Horse titles,
Hmm.
some Image books. I mean, I think the early 2010s was sort of a time of this revolution for all this incredible Image independently,
Yeah.
owned characters and titles that like I was hooked. I was honestly probably reading more Image than Marvel or DC at that
Right.
point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What about you?
well,
Yeah.
I remember, being in the comic book store, and which was primarily where what I'd be getting would be Superman, but
Yeah.
Spider-Man, X-Men at different times. And yeah, I just remember seeing Spawn and Savage Dragon. I would say like Image was
Sure.
my first
Yeah.
introduction to that, and being sort of image curious and
Yeah,
picking up a
absolutely.
couple of those comics and being surprised at like how graphic they were.
Yeah.
And I was like a freshman in high school, same kind of
Right.
the same age as you were. And then and then there would be, the Wildstorm stuff was interesting, and like Wild.
Sure. I remember watching the Wildcats cartoon and I never
Yeah.
read the book, but I knew all the characters
Did
somehow.
you? Okay.
Yeah.
I never really. And then Gen 13, I remember like with
Sure.
all J. Scott Campbell,
Yeah.
and then Michael Turner, Fathom, and Witchblade. I never collected any of those,
Yeah.
but I was always
It
obviously as like a 15-year-old boy seeing Witchblade and Michael Turner. I was
100%.
like,
You
oh,
were
this
just
is
like, yeah,
great.
this is 100%. It's so funny as you're saying that. I'm remembering that because I was a big Marvel guy, there was like a Gen X, Gen
Oh
13
yeah, I
crossover
have
that I
that.
remember buying because I was such a big fan of Generation X. And I think there was similarly, there must have been an X-Men Wildcats crossover,
Yeah.
right? So that was part of it also. And I definitely, while I never collected Witchblade, I knew everything. Like I knew about Witchblade and the Darkness and Fathom and
Yes,
that
the
whole
darkness.
world of characters.
Yeah.
And I think at some point in high school, actually, I collected some random Top Cow series that were not very good. There was one about a group of soldiers having to go into hell to try and like retrieve a fallen soldier.
Do you remember the Amanda Connors, Jimmy Palmiotti series? There's a miniseries called Gate Crashers.
No, I
Oh,
don't think.
it was like a full.
Wait, was that like very anime style or manga style drawings?
No, it was like cartoon style.
Okay.
It was very silly, it was basically like Starship Troopers in a comic, but it was written and drawn by those two who are like so
Oh,
silly.
very
And I
fun.
met them at a Comic-Con and they signed all four issues. It had like just come out. It was like
Amazing.
probably the first ever Comic-Con I went to. So that was I was really into that. But like I would say like Spawn and Savage Dragon I was really interested in, but I always felt like I didn't know what was going on when I dove
Yes,
into it. And then you're right.
absolutely.
I like didn't think about non-Marvel DC stuff for years and years and years. And then, right around when we were becoming friends, and then even after that, yeah, there was like this renaissance at Image, and it was like there was a Mark Miller who I don't really like so much,
Sure.
and Greg Capullo's story book called I can't remember now, but it was really good. And then of course, Black Hammer.
Right. Eventually we get to Jeff Lemire but that's Dark
Yeah,
Horse, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
Dark
yeah.
Horse, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with those Image guys, I remember I felt like basically all the authors I loved from Marvel all went and started their own series. So there was like
Which was kind of what
the
happened in the
Greg Rucka
90s.
Image book and there, but
Yeah.
this time with writers instead of
Right.
artists,
An artist,
right? So it
right.
was like the Greg Rucka book and the Matt Fraction book and the obviously Brian K. Vaughan book because
Mm.
Saga is still something that I read and love
Oh
and
yeah.
adore.
That's so good.
It's fun. We're basically just reminiscing about indie comics right now. But the other thing I remembered is there'd be occasional weird crossovers. So one thing I remembered was Malibu Comics
Mm.
had all these characters that would cross over with Marvel, and there was once this series called Exiles, not the Exiles I loved with Blink that happened in the 2000s about a time traveling team, but it was half Marvel characters. I think it was Juggernaut. Reaper from the Mutant Liberation Front and Sienna Blaze, who's like one of these characters that I think was in an issue of X-Men Unlimited and was supposed to be a big deal and then was never a big deal. And
Hmm.
it was those three with three Malibu characters that I can't even remember who, but I remember there was like Nightman, right? Who like had his own
Yeah.
he had a TV show on I
Yeah.
forget if it was UPN or WB, but there was this very low budget superhero show
Yeah.
based on that Malibu character. So there was always these tastes like you said, I always felt like they were these worlds that I didn't fully understand and couldn't dip my toe into.
And now today, like some of those independent things like IDW and do like IP stuff, which is really
Yes,
fun. Like I was
yeah,
just on a podcast talking about the Back to the Future comics. Like those are always really fun.
right.
I got into Malibu because they had Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I had the whole run
Oh,
of
that's
that. It was
very
basically just like the
fun.
first season. And Malibu didn't last long. I think Marvel ended up buying them or something, or
Yes, you know
uh,
what else I just remember because you saying that when they did AIP, I was very into the Mortal Kombat comic books coming out of Malibu that were going
oh.
deeper into the lore of like Sub-Zero and Goro and all these characters.
That's great. And
Yeah.
Top Cow for a while. One of them did WWE comics too for a little while. One of those,
Yes,
and it
I
was
feel like
like there were
that
like
also
backstories of The Rock and Mankind and
Mhm.
Big
And the
Show.
Undertaker that actually
Yeah.
involved like darkness and hell and all these weird things going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, indie comics, we do have experience with them.
Right. So like we've read independent comics, and I think it's harder to be sort of an expert in independent comics because there's such a breadth. Also, I would argue that there's a certain type of comic book collector who I can already hear saying, everything you named, that's not real independent
Of
comics.
course.
Real independent comics are self-published
Of
comics, right?
course. Yeah.
There's layers of independent.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think we're
think
saying not the big
right,
two.
not the big two, right?
Right.
So we're talking about comics that come from anything from Image or Dark Horse or smaller imprints that
And
might be out there.
I mean, Image starting was a huge revolution in the early 90s. Like when all of those Marvel artists left, like that was insane. There are stories of like Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee walking around cons with just like thousands of dollars of cash in their pockets. People ask them to draw things on
Yeah.
their lines around the block. And, now Jim Lee's running DC and Rob Liefeld's making his hot takes and still
Sure,
doesn't know how to
yeah.
draw feet.
Yep.
But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it was a phenomenon like this. And that was one of those big things that Wizard was always reporting on. And it was the only place you could find out about it, about what's going over at Image.
Yeah.
So, and then I think the bubble burst a little while and then, sort of came back.
Yeah. So what we're doing today is we're looking at the fact that there's a myriad independent comics, and some of them are actually very Jewish. They're entirely Jewish stories. But what they're not always are superheroes and Jewish. And our podcast, although we talk about Jewish characters, anyone who's listened to us knows that we mostly focus on the superheroes.
Yeah.
So we have for you today are diving into what we're calling independent Jewry. So, right, we're not any of the movements. We're looking at the independent Jewry, and we actually have three characters for you all listeners that we're very excited to share with you. So should we go into the first one?
Let's do it.
Cool. The first one is a character that up until this research I've never read,
Mhm.
but I heard about a lot. And this is a character known as Reuben Flagg from the comic book American Flagg. Now, American Flagg is kind of one of these, I don't know about early, but he's definitely, it's one of those independent comics that lasted for a while. It started,
1983,
I
right?
think, well, so in 1983, there was an independent publisher coming out of Evanston called First Comics. So right here, right next to us in Evanston, Illinois, First Comics started publishing a few comics through 1991, and then it closed down for 20 years, and in 2011 it reopened as uh, I don't know if it's still pronounced First Comics, but it's the number one and then no space and then First Comics.
Uh-huh.
In 1985, they moved to Chicago. I don't remember. Yeah, I think early 80s is when American Flag must have started. I feel like American Flag was probably the starting title.
Yeah.
The other titles that like stood out to me because I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of that, even though I've never really read them, were Nexus,
Okay.
which was by Mike Barron and Steve Rude. That Steve Rude art is very like I can picture it in my head. There
Really?
must have been an ad in Wizard
Oh,
once
okay.
upon a
I
time.
don't remember that
Um,
one. I know Steve Root, of course.
there was seemed to be like a pirate themed story called Grimjack by John Ostrander, who we've
Wow.
covered on the
Yes.
podcast with Suicide Squad, and Timothy Truman. And then I just thought it was entertaining that Jim Starlin had a big space cosmic
Of course.
called Dreadstar, which when I first heard Dreadstar, I assumed it must have been a reggae album by the Easy Star All Stars. I don't know if you know them.
No, no.
Reggae covers of different bands. So they had like Radio Dread. It was like an all reggae cover of OK Computer. Anyway, for anyone who knows Easy Star All Stars, great joke. Otherwise, meaningless,
And
but
of course, Jim Starlin did the space comic.
did all sorts right.
Yeah.
You like yes, like we have Thanos
Hmm.
and most of the MCU's main phase three storytelling
Right.
to thanks to Jim Starlin. Anyway, American Flag was this wild, crazy comic by Howard Chaykin, who I also know Howard Chaykin as being the author and I think artist of Concrete. That was the other big one that I remember hearing about a
Hmm.
giant concrete
Hmm.
slab, which now that we're talking, I'm wondering if there's any Golem
Could be.
references there,
Yeah.
but American Flag is set in the far future of 2031,
Oh my God.
which, in 1983, which felt really far. And now we're like, maybe, because listen, it's about a consumerist tech world that's spiritually bankrupt.
Oh my God.
You tell us if that sounds plausible in 6 years.
Right.
But the American government has actually moved to Mars. And instead, there's a corporation called Plex that is running what remains of the United States. Again, it's sounding not so distant, not so far off.
I would like certain members of our government to move to Mars. That would be nice.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so there's this guy named Reuben Flagg who's used to be a TV star, and he's
Mhm.
drafted into what I believe is like the police force of this corporation called the Plexus Rangers. So, and, the sense that I get is it's almost like there's these giant malls that are sort of where cities are now, and
Right.
then there's the Plexus Rangers, and Reuben Flagg is, of course, serving in Chicago. A lot of these first comics seem to take place in Chicago because that's
Right.
where all the creators were, that's where the publisher was.
I love that he just took uh the Texas Rangers and thought it was like, "Oh, how can I make that sound cool?" and like change it to a
Uh-huh.
word that like sounds sort of techie.
More like story, right? Like it very
Yeah.
much like not like a story, but like consumer store
Yeah.
right? Like it very much sounds like, yeah, I go shopping at Plexmart,
Breakfast. Yeah,
right?
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Plexus Rangers, so silly, Walker Plexus Ranger, basically, except we have this Jewish guy in Chicago called Reuben Flagg, which, Reuben, honestly, like it's one of our tribes, so
Hmm.
a good name for this Jewish boy. So he's known as a Jewish character. We're gonna look at two issues that have content. What's the first one we're looking at?
So we're going to look at American Flag number 26 from November 1985, Mad Dogs and Englishmen Conclusion. Written, penciled, and inked by Howard Chaykin, lettered by Ken Bruzenak, colored by Alex Wald, and edited by Mike Gold.
Perfect. So, yes, we're coming in at the end of a storyline. As always, we're looking only at the Jewish content, so we're only going to give you as much narrative as is necessary. On page 4, we have Reuben Flagg himself and his Russian partner, Kolyakov, who see some what we would call brown shirts, basically. They're either
Hmm.
Nazis or neo-Nazis, and they've been contacted by a woman they're following, Dr. Titania Weiss. And of course, because Dr. Titania Weiss is talking to these Nazis, Kolyakov says, I thought she was Jewish. And Henry, you want to tell us how Reuben Flagg responds?
Let's just say Dr. Weiss has some serious identity problems.
On the next page, on page 5, Reuben tries to arrest Dr. Weiss for murdering someone when, oh no, Kolyakov remembers that he has a real mission and he is told that Dr. Weiss, or as he thinks to himself, the Jewess, has a vital mini cassette and he needs to now betray Reuben Flagg, kill Flagg and Weiss. On page 7, he's getting ready to do so when out of the shadows comes a woman named Grace DeWolf. Now, Grace DeWolf turns out is in the comic basically Flagg's main love interest, his first love interest again. They're sort of on again, off again dating throughout this time. She's a quote, jazz singer and subversive fifth columnist working a liberal agenda. That's what Comic Vine told me about the character. But Grace DeWolf comes out and she saves Reuben Flagg. And so the question, of course, is how did she know where he was? How could she find him? And she says it's simple. I put a homing device in Reuben's mezuzah.
Brilliant. That is the best place for a homing
It's
device.
so silly to put a phone. The first time I heard this, I was like, that's amazing. What a cool concept. And then I paused and I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute. What is the point? Mezuzahs go up in your doorway,
And stay
Henry,
there.
and they stay there. What is the point of a mezuzah or a homing device
Yes,
in a
I know where he
mezuzah?
lives.
Yeah, confirmation. He's still at home, right? Exactly. So I think the implication must be like, what do we think that why would the mezuzah be moving? Do you think, Henry?
Are they not at his home where this happens?
But then, like, it wouldn't be. So would it be a homing device that only lets
Maybe
her
when
know when someone's nearby when
maybe
he's
when he
near it?
kisses it, it activates it, and she knows he's home.
So it's more of just like a transmitter that's coming
I
in. I think homing device literally means being able to follow
follow
someone,
someone,
though.
right? You think of like
Yeah,
Spider-Man putting a spider tracker on someone.
exactly.
I think this is a situation where it's a cute idea and they didn't think it through
Yeah.
and we're actually like thinking too hard into it and like
Well,
and they didn't I didn't think they didn't think it through.
brace yourself because I'm
Okay.
about to think even harder. Are you ready for
Okay.
this? Are you ready? Okay. Here's my theory. My theory is that actually the mezuzah was in his car and she's tracking his car. Now, that made me asking myself, can you put a mezuzah in a car?
Mm.
Why would you do that?
Lizzie
So
used to have one in her Honda Civic.
amazing.
Yeah.
So, right, Lizzie, your wife, used to do that. And we know that not only does a mezuzah contain, right, quotes from the Torah containing the Shema and other scripture, some people consider that the mezuzah in Judaism is viewed as being like protective, almost like an amulet. So if we look in the Mishnah, and specifically in Kalim 17:16, we find a reference to things that can and cannot become tameh, can gain
Mhm.
tuma, can gain impurity. It lets us know that makel sheyeshbo beit kabul mezuzah umargaliot hare elu tmein. A stick, I don't know if it's a walking stick, but like a stick of sorts that you have that has a like carved out, hollowed out receptacle or place in which you would put a mezuzah or a pearl is susceptible to tuma, is what it says.
Mm.
So we have the idea that you could have had a stick that would have a mezuzah in it. This comes from the Mishnah. And I think the idea is that likely it's probably acting as like a protection, that when you're out traveling, right, you could say Tefillat Derech, you could say the traveler's prayer, but you also could have this stick, and that the prayers that the words of Torah from the mezuzah would protect you as you travel.
That would be a cool gadget type James Bond type gadget for a Jewish character like Reuben Flagg, or like you can see like the Seraph having it where
Mhm.
he like presses it and it activates like a shield over
Or like
him.
he has like Moses' staff. It'd be cool if he like sort of like upgrades it and makes it so that there's this mezuzah within the staff, right? Yeah,
You say
exactly.
Shema and it's like
Yeah, exactly. Just like all this tech going around you. So I did some looking because like, can you put it in the car? The other thing I found is that in Brachot 24a, it lets us know that you're really not supposed to hang your tefillin, your phylacteries.
Mhm.
That the one hatolet filav yitalu lo chayav. That one who hangs their tefillin, their own life hangs in the balance. So basically, it's a disrespectful act.
Meaning like hanging them up.
Like hanging them up
Oh, okay.
somewhere. Exactly,
Like
exactly.
they're basically saying you can't use tefillin, which also contains the Shema, as a mezuzah.
Well, it's saying that you can't use tefillin, which also contains the Shema, and just hang it somewhere, right?
Okay.
So the reason I'm bringing this up is to say that that could be comparable to hanging a mezuzah, let's say in a car, and having it sort of hanging from the rear view mirror or something like that. So I was looking up basically, and Chabad had sort of an article about like, can you have a mezuzah in your
Yeah.
car or not?
What did they
And
say?
ultimately, what they landed on was the idea that like you could many people feel like you could probably put it there, but you would have to, sorry, redo that.
Mhm.
Many are concerned that it might be disrespectful, but there are people who say that you could indeed put a mezuzah somewhere like the glove compartment or somewhere else where it's not hanging, and therefore it would be more respectful. Although they also keep in mind this does not fulfill the
Mhm.
mitzvah of a mezuzah, but it is possible. So I'm still going with my theory that he had a mezuzah in his car.
Great. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Lizzie had one, I think, on her dash maybe, or on the side, the door. Like it was
Oh,
like
in at
pasted
the
up or
door. That's a
something. I
cool
don't remember.
concept.
I
Yeah.
don't remember exactly. I'm pretty sure. But
I mean, if you had a mobile home, you should probably put a
right.
mezuzah in the mobile home, right?
Right. But I'm surprised there isn't something, by the way, leave it to Judaism. Like we're like trying to figure out this like modern problem. And they're like, and you're like, in the Mishnah, it said like they had
Hmm.
cars back then. It's like, I don't remember that one. But
Right.
I'm surprised there isn't like, maybe there is a Mishnah or Gemara about like someone traveling and could they have a mezuzah in their in their horse carriage or something,
Sure.
like
Yeah. Or
that.
like at some point by like other halakhic codes about that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's something fun to dive into. Could
Interesting.
be. Anyway, that is it. We have the mezuzah, which is a cool concept from Howard Chaykin, even if not the best thought out. All right, where are we going to next for another very quick one, Henry?
Next, we're looking at American Flag, number 50, March 1988. Jumping ahead a little bit. The Best Man, sort of, written by Howard Chaykin, penciled and inked by Mike Vosburg, lettered by Ken Bruzenak, colored by John Moore, edited by Rick Oliver.
Well, on page 10 of this comic, Reuben Flagg is confronting the, of course, corrupt Marsplex president.
Shocking that the
Shocking.
president who lives on Mars of a corporation
Yes.
is
Yeah.
corrupt.
And yeah, so he's confronts him. The president's surrounded by the media. And rather than try to fight against him, the president just hands the key to the city over and says, "Good night and good luck, Jew boy. You're in charge now, smart guy." I assume people in the future talk like people in the past, right?
Right, he's like a kid selling papers, extra, extra in like the
Yeah.
20s.
Exactly, exactly. Extra, extra, you're in charge now. And then, of course, Grace DeWolf then says, "So tell us in your own words, Mr. Flagg, exactly how does it feel to be the first Jewish president?" And that's it for our Jewish content, is just the fact that it calls out if Reuben Flagg, in a very undemocratic process, is just named president.
But with and it's like it's a key to the city and it's literally a key.
Right. It's literally a key because they're in a future where, right, they're just in the city. Anyway, it kind of reminds me of what we covered with Colossal Boy,
Hmm.
where his mom was
Yeah.
president of Earth, and we had that one panel, but
Yeah.
like it's the acknowledgement, like, oh, wait, his mom's president. That means there's a Jewish president of the
Right.
world. And so here we have, the first Jewish American president. This is suggesting it took till 2031. So again, we have 6 years, everybody, to beat American flag.
At least Colossal Boy was having Shabbat dinner. I mean, I
Yeah, here
don't
all he's really got is mezuzahs that somehow can home in on where he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not much.
there's not much to it. And
Yeah.
then,
It's a shame that like you'd make an entire character like specifically Jewish and then, like, not do much
I
other
mean,
than
it
make
kind of
stuff up.
comes up.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, I think, because I've seen, online recently, I feel like as there was debate over the things Jewishness and Fantastic Four, I saw somebody argue online and was like, I don't go to synagogue and I'm Jewish. I felt perfectly represented by the fact that he doesn't go to synagogue a lot. And we're like, okay, that's fair. But I think it does raise the question of like, other than saying, hey, I'm Jewish, like, what does that mean? And I'm not trying to say, right, that like people, but like, what? knowing a character is Jewish, I would love to see them doing anything with that
Anything. Yeah.
Jewishness, as
The thing
always.
at least went into a synagogue
Yeah,
in that
absolutely.
movie.
But Ruben Flagg, all he
Yeah.
seems to do is get told that he's Jewish. And there's, throughout the series, it looks like there's occasionally anti-Semitic comments of people, which I guess, maybe for Howard Chaykin and for other creators, for some people, anti-Semitism is sometimes their experience of Jewishness.
Right. And we spent a lot of time on this with the Captain America issues,
Yes,
just
and the Golem
and the
issues,
Golem issues, like, is covering anti-Semitism, explicit Judaism.
right?
And, I don't remember if we came to a conclusion, and maybe it just depends on the situation, but
Yeah.
here certainly, maybe.
Yeah, it falls within the wider Jewish topic, but I
Yeah.
think when it's the only thing covered, it just kind of is a bummer.
It's kind of, yeah, it's like you have this character named Reuben Flagg, you go out of your way to mention him as a say he's Jewish, and I don't know, this is in 50 issues, this is it.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then like we don't really cover it, but like on a later page, he fantasizes about himself giving what looks like a Nazi salute to a crowd. It's very strange. I don't know what Howard Chaykin is working through.
Yeah,
But
it's and then, yeah, and the way they're chanting Reuben, Reuben, and they're all sort of sig-heiling him too. It's very the crowd.
yeah,
It's
it's a
an un
strange fantasy.
it's yeah. But then I guess he's it was a dream maybe because he's asleep or
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's a
yeah.
dream that he's having. Yeah. Anyway, at the end of the issue, just so people know, he does give up being the president.
Oh, phew.
But yeah, he arranges to be given Illinois and Chicago to run it as a separate state. So
Right.
independent Chicago. That's it for Reuben Flagg. We're saying goodbye to him. Henry, who's our next character?
Our next character, you're not going to believe this. His name is the Acidic Jew.
Yeah, which just to make sure, because I didn't get it the first time, is a very silly pun,
Yeah.
right? That right, he is not just Orthodox. He is the acidic Jew.
They finally figured out a way for people not to struggle saying "Huh."
Yes, exactly. They just dropped it
They just
completely,
got
not
rid
even
of
an
it
H.
completely. Yeah.
Yeah. So the acidic Jew is coming from Top Cow, which we were talking about, home to Witchblade and the Darkness and all those titles, the Magdalena, etc. But also home to books like J. Michael Straczynski's Rising Stars, which I
Mhm.
remember when that was a really big deal
Mhm.
before J. Michael Straczynski came over to write some Spider-Man comics
And then some Superman comics.
and some Superman comics, right? He wrote some great stuff for the Big Two.
Yeah.
And of course, Top Cow itself was an imprint within Image, founded by one of the Image founders, that being Mark Silvestri. Now,
Mm.
Henry, I always get a little confused. I don't know if you know better. It's like an imprint just means it's like there's a larger publisher, and an imprint is sort of like like a studio within that publisher that it's like the comic goes out and it gets like the imprint, the like insignia of whatever that studio
I
is.
mean, again, so it might be different. Again, I only know my most of my knowledge comes from Marvel and DC. So when I hear imprint, I think of like Elseworlds or
Hmm.
Ultimate,
Right.
for Marvel or something like that.
Right. Or
That's
Marvel Knights for Marvel. Yeah.
Marvel Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. They were calling that an imprint. So maybe those aren't the truest of imprints because they still say Marvel Comics in the corner under Marvel Knights and
Right.
Ultimate still, I think.
So that means then, sorry, did you just say this? Vertigo would be like also a
Vertigo. Yeah.
Vertigo would have been a
Yeah.
DC
Yeah.
imprint when it
Yeah.
was.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Right. So within Image, there was something called Top Cow, but I felt like with those books, they were always labeled Top Cow much more than
Yeah.
Image. Like you thought of them as Top Cow.
I didn't realize, maybe I'm sure at the time I knew this, but I don't think until this moment I realized that Top Cow was an imprint of Image.
Yeah, same, same. So anyway, within Top Cow, we have a comic series called Common Grounds, which is also a very fun punny name because Common Grounds is a comic book about this world of superheroes in which every issue features at least two different characters. And after they save the day, they decide to sit down and get a cup of coffee at a place called Common Grounds, which is a great name for a coffee shop. And the idea is that these heroes who didn't know each other before talk and they find some common
Common ground.
ground as they're talking to each
I
other.
mean, is there anything more like,
Jewish adjacent.
yeah, Jewish adjacent and like millennial, like a comic named after the coffee shop where the heroes go,
Yes.
and it's a pun. Like
Yeah.
it's like a cheesy coffee, coffee shop
Hmm.
pun, but which are always fun, you
Yeah. Well,
know.
despite how cheesy it is, so this is written by Troy Hickman, who I don't know much of Troy's other work, but it's actually a critically acclaimed limited series. It received two Eisner nominations. So people really loved Common Grounds when it came out, and I remember always being interested in it. And
So you were aware of it.
I remember being aware of it decades ago. Yeah. And like once again, it was a comic. I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. Right. I mean, I think we already discussed, but you know, were big fans of the big two, and there were always these different independent comics that would come out and would make entire worlds of superheroes that you
Hmm.
only met in a few issues. So
Hmm.
you had Astro City, as I mentioned, which
Hmm.
was sort of it had like a Superman-like character and a
Hmm.
Batman-like character. We eventually wind up with Black Hammer, as you were saying, by Jeff Lemire over in Dark Horse. You had things like this, like Common Ground. So it was just one of those places comics where it's like, oh, here's a bunch of superheroes I don't know anything about, but I knew about this coffee concept, and
Right.
I'd heard about the fact that there was this Jewish character called the Hasidic Jew. And so I'm
Amazing.
so glad we're finally going to dive in. This happens. It's from April 2004, Common Grounds #3. Can you tell us about this story?
Yeah, this is Common Grounds #3, April 2004, Sanctuary, written by Troy Hickman, penciled by Chris Bachalo, inked by Aaron Soud and Tom Bar-Orr, colored by Brian Buccellato and Sonia Oback. Chris Bachalo is familiar to us.
Yeah, he's
Spider-Man,
wonderful.
X-Men, 90, like late early 2000s.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
so much. I mean, for me, I actually first knew him through he illustrated Neil Gaiman's Death, the High Cost of Living,
Oh.
and Death, the Time of Your Life, which were part of the Sandman universe through
Mhm.
Vertigo. So I remember knowing and loving those. Although that was before all the modern things came to light, like Neil Gaiman as
Yeah.
not such a great person. But yeah, Chris Bachalo doing that work and then doing Generation X and doing X-Men, like you said, did some Spider-Man, has like a very cool, like sometimes messy style, but like really neat artwork.
It's like sort of controlled chaos. Like
Yes.
it's taking inspiration from I think some ma manga and it's
Yes.
some of that exaggerated thing. But for me, it always worked perfect for Spider-Man. Like
Yes.
his the way
Very
he
good
drew
for them.
Spider-Man's hands sort of lives free and rent free in my
Yeah.
hand, or like Gambit throwing a
Throwing a
card.
card.
Yeah,
Sure, yeah. He was
yeah.
also very good at having like little details in the panels. Like I
Hmm.
remember the Gen X issues, there would just be these fun, like a little frog in the corner, like all these, like, he would just throw weird stuff in there, which was
Yeah.
fun. Anyway, so yeah, like also like big deal artists because Chris Pachalo is still drawing today, as far as I know. I
Mhm.
remember a few years ago there was a Doctor Strange run by Jason Aaron and Chris Pachalo that was
Mm.
very cool to see.
Wow.
All right, so on page 3, every issue of Common Grounds, I believe, covered two different stories. So this was one of the two. And on page 3, we meet a young superheroine named Debutante, which is another punny attempt on a debutante, I suppose. And she's being attacked by thugs, but she gets saved by this very classically Hasidic-looking man who's just dripping in what looks like this gold goo. Henry, I mean, you're the art aficionado here,
Yeah.
I think. Like, what do you think of this very cool debut of the Hasidic Jew?
Okay, I've been dying to talk about this. I'm so happy you asked me that. First of all, I wouldn't say it's a full splash page, but
It's like three-quarters of a splash
yeah,
page.
it's three
Yeah.
quarters of it's more than half of the page, and it's a full introduction to this character. You don't see his face, only his beard, hat, coat, and it's clear that and his very long payas, side locks, really long, like
Yeah.
like
Yeah, that like
like
that
George Perez
exaggerated
Wonder Woman
like
hair long.
yeah.
Speaking of Wonder Woman, so I love that it wrapped around his fist. He's doing those fingers that I talked about, like for Spider-Man. Wrapped around his fist, which is in the foreground, is this gold glowing goo, easy for me to
Yeah.
say. And what it reminded me of actually was not something gooey, but it reminded me of when Wonder Woman's lasso is
Oh,
wrapped around his
cool.
fist or
Yeah, and
someone
it starts to have a
else's.
glow of sorts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he looks like he's about to beat someone
Yes.
ass, like Hebrew Hammer style,
Right.
you
And
know?
unsurprisingly, from the fact that his name's the acidic Jew, this is basically acid that's
Yeah.
coming out of him. But it's not a green acid, right? It's this like
No, it's
bright gold
it's
acid.
glowing.
It's very cool. Now, I wanted to point this out, Henry, and I want to be able to show you. It's so cool to see. This is not Chris Bachalo's, I know definitively Chris Bachalo's first time drawing Hasidic Jews because
Really?
in 2003 he was illustrating a book by Mark Miller called Ultimate War, and Ultimate War was a crossover between the Ultimates, which were the Ultimate Avengers, and the Ultimate X-Men, and
Yeah,
as
I
they're
remember
fighting.
that one.
And in number four, as the Avengers go hunting them, Cerebro is basically coming up with all sorts of things to distract the Avengers, and it ends up creating Hasidic ninjas.
My
And
God.
so you see, drawn by Chris Bachalo, we see this Hasidic ninja with a sword, and then a series of them coming after Hawkeye. And we'll never cover this comic, so I just need to bring
Okay.
it up now,
Yeah.
right? The Hasidic ninja comes in because Hawkeye goes, "What the hell?" And the Hasidic ninja says, "In answer to your question, my young friend, Judaism teaches that the first five books of the Bible were dictated word for word by God to his servant Moses. These books are known as the Torah, and we shall begin our studies with Genesis." And then they go to attack with their ninja swords, with their samurai swords. It's such a bizarre, cool
That's
moment.
so silly. I
It's,
love that.
yeah.
What a reveal, Brandon.
So yeah, so Chris Pachalo has had his expertise, and now he's like, all right, now we've got it without the sword. Now he's got the gold glowing. Um, and the Hasidic Jew, after saving debutante, lets the bad guys know, just go and think about what you've done. Which, like,
He's
what
like,
good dad energy.
right, he like beat the shit out of them and he's like, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed.
I'm very disappointed in what he chose to do. Yeah. So on page four, debutante, who, I mean, how would you describe debutante's outfit, Henry?
It's it is scantily clad
Yeah.
as a female superhero was known to be. I mean, it was sort
Especially in the
of
early 2000s. Yeah.
it's like Superwoman's from the Earth 3, Ultraman's wife. It's
Right.
the evil Wonder Woman. It's like
Okay.
her outfit. It's
Yeah.
sort of mini skirt,
Right.
short top, you know.
Right. Shoulders bare, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Right. So she looks and she's thanking him for help. And
She should be dressed as like a Southern belle if she's a debutante. Like,
yeah, I think maybe we're gonna find out she's pretty young, so maybe
yeah,
she just like doesn't. She's just
yeah.
like it sounds cool. But anyway, the Hasidic Jew looks away and he says, "Sizgornisht." It means, it's nothing. Great Yiddish, Troy Hickman. Perfect Yiddish. Scornish, Sizgornisht. So.
And he even translates it.
You're right. It's beautiful. And
So inclusive.
despite looking away, the Hasidic Jew is actually the one on page five who invites her to go get tea at Common Grounds with him. And he lets her know. And the best thing is they have a menu that allows me to keep kosher, which also like good for this coffee shop. I love that they have kosher options for him.
Now, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, Brandon, but I couldn't help thinking, like, wondering how accurate this would be as a would a Jew of this level of observance go into a not hechshered, like not dafka, not kosher establishment where
Sure,
they
sure,
serve
sure.
other things, even if they had other, for fear that some might see him,
Right. Right.
Marazion, and see and think, oh, that's a kosher place. There's a guy to keep.
Yeah, I mean,
Am I going too deep
I
here?
would say in my experience, right, when I worked on college campuses and I would go and meet with the Chabad rabbis, we would often go and meet in coffee shops that were not fully
They
kosher,
just
but
wouldn't order
they
anything.
wouldn't order anything.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember if they ever ordered like a tea.
right,
Probably not. But he orders significantly more than tea, which
right.
makes me think that at the very least, maybe it's sort of like when you go to the airport and they have the separate like wrapped kosher section. Like maybe they actually have kosher availabilities, but
Yeah.
who knows? Either that or it is a surprisingly kosher establishment. But I love that when he sits down, he removes his shtreimel, he removes his large black hat, and he just has the black kippah on. And he ends up ordering a bagel with cream cheese and a glass of tea. So, of course, Henry, I have to ask, what kind of bagel do you think you got and what kind of cream cheese?
I would hope it's either an everything bagel.
It's got to be everything, right? Yeah.
Cream cheese, I'm gonna say because it's an everything bagel, just straight up. If it's like a whole wheat or plain or something, then like a chive cream
Okay.
cheese.
Oh, I
I would
like
say
that. I
like
like,
it's
yeah.
one or the other. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not a cream cheese guy. I don't
Me
think cream
neither.
cheese is
I'm not.
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate cream cheese.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
I will always do a buttered bagel
yeah,
over cream cheese.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. So, we maybe lost all of our cred with our
I
listening.
know. I don't like white foods that are ambiguously shaped or in liquid form.
Yeah. Fair
Cream
enough.
cheese falls under that. I don't understand if it's supposed to be like spread and melt or if it's supposed to be like thick, and like the way people bite into it, it's on their gums. It just like grosses me out.
There's just something about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough. Well, but the Hasidic Jew likes his bagel and cream cheese, and he introduces himself. His real name is Moshe Chomsky, which great name.
Yeah.
And then the press have called him the Hasidic Jew, and he kind
Mhm.
of self-groans at the pun, I believe.
Mhm.
And Moshe lets debutante know that due to his beliefs, it's inappropriate to look directly at a woman unless necessary. So just to go into this a little bit, because this is one of those difficult things. Like you've heard stories, like I get uncomfortable with the idea that there are Jewish men that like sort of go out of their way to like not look at women in this, like it feels like it's sort of
Disrespectful.
disrespectful, right? Even though I know they're following their beliefs and they believe it is the right thing to do. I don't know if you ever saw that image one time of like a Hasidic guy on a plane that basically had like sort of like a shroud or like all around his hat so he couldn't see anywhere. So there's no way he could see a woman, which felt like it's really going extreme. But really, this is rooted in Numbers 15:39, which is actually, funny enough, part of Shema, right?
Oh,
Which is the line, "V'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem asher atem zonim," or if you know the trope, the "V'lo
true.
taturu acharei levavchem." Yes, so you shall not stray after your heart or after your eyes, through which you lust through them, right? So basically the idea being like, don't don't follow astray from the path, going after the things that your heart or your eyes are lusting for. It's literally the word zonim, which is like sort of like doing a form of yeah, lusting
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
something inappropriate. And then beyond that, in Nedarim, in the Talmud, and in other places throughout halachic literature, we have a quote from Rabbi Acha, the son of Rabbi Yoshia, who says, "Anyone who watches women will ultimately come to sin." And they say, like, even if he's just looking at the heel of her shoe. Now, this seems to be the sort of root for the idea of you shouldn't look at a woman specifically for the purposes of like trying to gain pleasure from it, like admiring her beauty and trying to take pleasure in just looking at her. Now, technically, if that's the ruling, you would think that it also should be you should be like Moshe Chomsky and look away rather than dictating what they can or cannot wear. But if you look into the halachic literature, there seems to be even more of a concern that comes up if a woman is quote unquote inappropriately dressed.
Gotcha.
So we see why Moshe Chomsky looks away. Yeah.
The vibe I got, it, it was like, it felt very respectful of like the way he is.
Yeah.
He's like, he's also like, he doesn't want to be in an inappropriate situation with this
Yes, that's
young, scantily
true.
clad woman. I kind of
Right.
feel like he was being respectful.
That's a
In
fair
this
take. In this
specifically,
specific
I
one,
think
I like
I do
that.
understand what you're saying though, that it
Yeah.
could be interpreted that way.
I love that because having worked on college campuses, there definitely were some moments where like students would come and I'd be like, I need to look very directly in another direction because of what you're wearing right now. Because it's just like, yeah, like, yep, it's fine. I'm going to take care of myself. But like, okay. Yes, so you're right. And I think she like mentions that she's a teenager basically,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah. So yes, so he's being and obviously he invited her to tea. He's still talking to her. So
Mm.
he's not ignoring her as a person, which I
Right.
think that's where it really becomes disrespectful in that sort of case. So on page 6, Moshe explains that he's thanking the Almighty for his food. So he's clearly saying some sort of, well, he's probably saying hamotzi. I was going to say some
Yeah.
sort of bracha, but if he's got his bagel, he's saying that. And then he reveals the origin of his powers and lets her know they first manifested themselves while I was helping my friend Menachem with his diamond business. It was a very costly revelation,
Mhm.
which what a fun concept imagining that like, oh my God, he started dripping acid on the diamonds. Like, poor guy. Luckily, through prayer and concentration, I can turn it off for a few moments at a time. Hopefully, I can suppress it until I've finished my bagel. I nearly starved for the first month I had this power, which
Wow. That's nuts.
devastating to think that he needs to have like absolute concentration while eating, or else he's just gonna melt through whatever it is.
But I think there's some analogies happening here
Sure.
that of like the a person like this who also like studies Torah and observes the commandments does it with great intention and
Yes.
kavanah and
Yes.
concentration. And so
Love
like
it.
for his powers, he has to also. And like that he's like that's like real mindful eating,
Yeah,
right? Like having such kavanah
absolutely.
that you have to control yourself while you're eating so that you can
So that you
eat.
can actually eat.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. It's this comic book superheroization of Kavanagh
Hmm.
itself. Yeah, that
Hmm.
he really needs to have Kavanagh to interact with the world, which, like, again, ends up being this beautiful metaphor for the idea of like we have the ability to cause destruction in this world if we don't have the proper
Hmm.
Kavanagh,
Hmm.
which we're going to see him emphasize as we keep going. But before we get there, Debutante asks why he's out in the outside world at all. And she ends up saying, I've seen movies and stuff. I thought you guys kept pretty much to yourselves. Which again, Henry, now I'm wondering, what movies do you
I
think
know.
Debutante saw
What,
that she?
where should that? Oh, Jews keep to themselves. I
I'm
really
not
have
entirely sure what it would
have no
be.
idea.
So, Henry, did you ever see the movie Menashe?
No.
So it's a movie that came out in 2017. I'm trying and I can't for the life of me remember what sect it is, but it's a movie shot pretty much entirely in Yiddish
Hmm.
about this guy because the director who is Jewish went into Brooklyn, found this ultra Orthodox neighborhood, and found this guy who was just like funny and silly and so charismatic and was like, you will take a camera and like went in and filmed a movie that was like a fictional version of the guy's life, sort of
Oh, it's not a
inspired by it.
documentary.
It's not a documentary. It is a fictional story in which this guy who has never experienced acting, this Jewish guy, Menashe Lustig, plays a fictionalized version of himself to tell this story.
Is it filmed documentary style?
No, it's filmed
No.
like a movie. It's
Uh,
it's like distributed by A24. It was great.
oh,
I
wow.
remember seeing it in theaters way back in my early movie pass days. But yeah, it was a really cool movie. So anyway, I was just thinking like Menashe was a movie where they're kind of separate. So maybe if that had come out, but that movie came out,
Yeah, I don't.
13 years after this. So I don't know what she came up with. So Moshe Chomsky, our Hasidic Jew, lets her know, well, my father is a Rebbe, a very pious and very important man among Hasidim. He decided that my powers were a divine gift and sent me into the world to seek my fate. I have learned not to question my father's wisdom. Which sounds like a Rebbe, like
Mhm.
so silly. Kind of sounds a little like Chabad in the idea that it's like being sent out into the world. But I also decided, I was
And
like,
also, like, not really giving him the answer of where his powers came from, you know?
yeah, just
Like,
like go
from
out and see
God,
what happens.
yeah.
But I really love, so I went down this rabbit hole that again is just me thinking more than I needed to, Henry, but
Of
hopefully
course,
you'll
as,
appreciate
as
it,
one does.
as one does with
Yeah.
this podcast. So I was like, all right, if his father is a Rebbe, he didn't say a rabbi, but a Rebbe, which
Mhm.
means like from a Hasidic dynasty.
Mhm.
So which dynasty do we think Moshe Chomsky comes from? As far as I can see, there's no rabbis with the last name Chomsky. We know
Okay.
about Noam Chomsky, the intellectual, but there's no records of a Rabbi Chomsky. However, Noam Chomsky's father is apparently from Kupil, which is a village in Western Ukraine. So I looked up Western Ukraine to see, all right, what options are nearby? And the options we have include Chernobyl, from which we had the Meore Naim, Rabbi Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl and his dynasty. We've got Rizhin or Ruzhin. We have Yisrael Friedman, Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhin, which eventually branches off into the Sadigora dynasty. And then we've got Makhnovka, which is a sub-dynasty of Skver. So it feels like if we follow this, maybe the Hasidic Jew comes from one of these dynasties, that his father's a Rebbe in either Chernobyl, which I think ends out at one point, but either from Chernobyl, from Rizhin, or from Skver. But I loved just that like
It's
little
awesome.
mental exercise.
It's awesome. The son of a Jewish genealogist here is very happy. I love
Yes.
that.
So Moshe explains that he uses his powers to help people, not to start fights. I
Hmm.
love that. He's a
Hmm.
reactive hero.
Hmm.
He's helping out. And Debutante lets him know that she's thinking of giving up being a superhero because she barely makes a difference. Henry, do you actually want to read to us what he says in response?
It is not for me to tell you what to do. I will say, though, that you, like all of God's children, have a responsibility to the peace of the world entrusted to you. That is your greatness.
I just want to say before we continue, love that. I
Yeah.
get that feels to me like it has to be influenced by in Pirkei Avot 2:16, the Lo Alecha Hamlacha Ligmor. It's not on you to finish the work.
Mm.
V'lo atah ben chorim lihibatel mimenu. You're also not free to desist from it, right?
Mm.
Like he's basically telling her, like, you have some, I don't know what size of the work you have, but there's something that you're going to need to do.
It's
Yeah.
a very Jewish way of saying with great power comes great responsibility.
100%. Love it. Yes, you have there's a part of the world that is entrusted to you and only you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our worth is based not on who we are, but on what we've done to make earth into heaven. We each we each do what we can, and it cannot be compared to what others do.
Love it. He's giving such a great Josh right now. Such a great teaching.
You know, Moses was a great man, but if I don't do my part, when I go to the next life, I will not be asked, "Why were you not Moses?" I will be asked, "Why were you not Moshe?" Now, do you understand? Or do you understand now?
Love it. It's such a I love that Troy Hickman has literally taken the very famous teaching and story of Rabbi Zusha,
Hmm.
right? Who Zusha is the one who's worried. For anyone who doesn't know, Henry, I'm sure you know the story, but Rabbi Zusha is despondent. His students find him depressed and like, Rabbi Zusha, what's wrong? And Rabbi Zusha says, I have learned the question that the Holy One will ask me when I go to my day of judgment. And like, well, what has you so upset? What could it be? He says, I've learned that the Holy One will not ask me, Zusha, why weren't you Abraham? For I am not Abraham, and I did not need to be as great in my hospitality as he was. And I've learned that the Holy One will not ask me, Zusha, why weren't you Moses? For I am not Moses, and I don't have to have his, challenges with leadership, do what he did. I have learned that the question the Holy One will ask me is, Zusha, why weren't you Zusha?
Hmm.
And it's this beautiful teaching that gets taught
Yeah,
over and over. And Troy Hickman has literally reworded it now and brought it into this.
that's pretty cool.
It
He
loses a
did his
ton.
research. I
He
mean,
did his research, or he knew this stuff, right?
right.
Whichever it is. Now, it loses a little bit of its zing when it's why were you not Moses? Why weren't you Moshe? Like the names are a little too similar, but I absolutely love that it's in there. And wait, I looked it up and Rabbi Zusha is from Hanipol or Anipoli, which is actually closer to Kupil than any of those places I
Oh,
mentioned before. So is the Hasidic Jew
a
from a
descendant of Moses.
descendant of Zusha himself.
What period of time was Zusha?
Zusha was born in 1718 and died in 1800.
Wow.
So it would have been generations and generations back
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
But
Great.
it's a possibility.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Very good, brother.
Well,
That was
I felt
excellent.
like that was a good way to bring it together, right?
That was great.
So debutante thanks Moshe for giving her so much to think about. And of course, how else would he end the comic but by saying,
This is Gornished.
"This is Gornish." Love it. Oh my gosh, Henry, what did you think of the Acidic Jew?
I, I'm I've had so much time to think about it, but I'm still kind of speechless at how great this was as like an introduction of a Jewish character who I've never seen before, but I totally understand in just a few panels and isn't could easily have dipped into sort of cartoony stereotypes. And there are some stereotypical things, but they're wrapped up in like actually deep Torah and like deep like Jewish identity stuff that it was just delightful to see. It's
Like,
fantastic. I wish he was in like a Marvel character or a DC character.
100%. I would love to see more of it. I mean, because it really came about for me when you described him as a man of great kavanah and realizing like, yes, he is the concept of kavanah in this world to the extreme, where as you said, like, as I was saying, and as you said, like he needs to focus just to not cause damage to his food, just to not starve. He needs to have great intention. And what a beautiful metaphor for the idea that like in this world, Tikkun Olam is not just making the world a better place, but it's the idea that each of us has a part of our own lives, of our own souls, of the world that we are responsible for making better. And if we're not careful, we're going to wreck this world. We're going to devastate it. And he has acid that will do that. But instead, he's using that acid, which also, right, it's such a Hasidic concept to take the thing that is your struggle and make it in service of God, right? The
Mm,
idea that you should take your Yetzer Hara, your wicked inclination, and how to actually make it in service of God rather than
mhm,
against God. So there's, I think this, I forget if it comes from the Talmud or elsewhere, but there's this idea that someone who has a Yetzer Hara, which inclines them towards bloodshed, right? So it's like if they didn't control it, they might go out and murder people. And it's like that person should become a butcher because then they get to take their need for bloodshed and like apply it in service, like they become a kosher butcher. It's a silly concept, but it also is reflective of this idea of no matter what's going on, you can, with kavanah, make it in service of making this world a better place. And I like Troy Hickman has to be, he has to have a good Jewish education. Like, I do not think this is a comic that comes about because you did your research. This feels like
Mm.
he's really
It's like,
integrated these ideas into this character, you know?
do you know anything about Troy Hickman? Is he
No, I tried
Jewish
Googling it.
or
I mean, with the name Hickman, I do believe he is, but I could not
he's
find
not
very
related to
much.
Jonathan Hickman?
That's the one thing I found out, yes, that he's not related to Jonathan
Is
Hickman.
Jonathan Hickman Jewish?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think he might be. I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah, I mean, did you love this guy?
I loved him. I loved him
Yeah.
so much, right?
Don't
Like,
you want to see this
I'll
happens to us
start.
every few times. We're like, we want to see more of someone. We haven't said it in a while, but
Strikes the same, he resonates with me in the same way that Ramban
yeah,
from the Chayot
yeah,
did,
yeah.
where he's like not just visibly Jewish, but visibly learnedly Jewish, and just he has that menschiness to his superheroing,
Mm,
right? Like I would actually love him and Ramban would probably get along and have
he's a
great
great team up.
conversations. It would have this amazing, right? Like let's have a nice DC Top Cow crossover and see it happen.
Start the fan fiction now.
Absolutely. Well, we have one final comic from,
Wait,
yeah,
did we ever see the acidic Jew again? Like,
as far as I know, this is his one and only appearance, and that is most characters in Common Ground. Is
right.
they pop up in this one issue, and then
Oh,
that's it. Like
oh,
every issue is different characters getting to talk over coffee.
I see. Oh my God, what a great concept.
Exactly. Well, that's why I think it was got like the Eisner noms because it's a great concept. It was well written, and
Mhm.
it's deep characterization getting discovered.
Oh, fantastic.
Right. It also feels kind of like the Kevin Smithification of a superhero battle. You're right, where it's like I think Kevin Smith had this thing where he always talked about an idea where there's like a big adventure movie happening just off panel, and you're just following the two guys talking to each other
Right,
throughout it. Where it's like it's a superhero comic that's not about the fights at all.
right.
It's about the characters just bonding over coffee, right? Like it's a very no. Let's actually have them talk, and that's still going to be just as interesting.
Right.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
loved it. Loved it. We're jumping almost 20 years later
Wow.
to just 2 years ago to our final comic, something called The Holy Roller, which is a guy named Levi Cohen, the son of bowler David Cohen. The Holy Roller from Image Comics. And this came out, well, Henry, why don't you tell us about the issue we're going to dive into?
Sure. So this is The Holy Roller, #1, November 2023, written by Andy Samberg, Rick Remender, and Joe Troman, penciled by Roland Boschi, colored by Moreno Denisio, lettered by Russ Wooten, edited by Harper Jate.
I'm sorry, Henry, can you tell me again who this is written by?
Andy Effin Samberg.
What the? Oh my God.
Beloved SNL, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, everyone's favorite, nice Jewish boy, funny Jewish boy.
Master of the digital shorts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Andy Samberg co-wrote a comic book.
I'm surprised it took him till 2023 to
It's a
co-write a
little
comic.
surprising, right? But it's amazing. And he wrote it with Rick Remender, who,
That's one of
speaking
your
of indie
favorites.
comics, I adore Rick Remender. I fell in love with his work because of his Uncanny X-Force run, which
Mm,
remains one of the
mm,
most rewarding, amazing X books of the 2010s and decades, honestly.
mm.
And then Rick Remender also wrote some independent comics I loved, including Deadly Class, which is a really fun comic. But anyway, yeah, this is an image book where Andy teams up with Rick Remender, and I'm not super familiar with Joe Troman, but obviously Andy Samberg is Jewish, and
Mhm.
so this is clearly a comic about a Jewish superhero. In fact, the son of a bowler. So like kind of has some Big Lebowski
Yes,
vibes
yes.
to it,
You
right?
used to say bowler, and yeah, I can hear the pins falling.
Hmm.
Hearing the man in me start playing.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So, we're not going to have too much Jewish content, but we have some in the first. I think this was a six-issue series. We really only have content in the first and a tiny bit of the second. But on page 5, we're getting the origin of Levi Cohen. His father is competing in a bowling competition. Levi's in the arcade at the local mall, and there's a bully named Clyde. And Clyde is bullying Levi for talking to his sister, and he knocks all his quarters off the arcade game and then starts accusing Levi of crawling for pennies, which I love that Levi's response is like, they're quarters, they're not pennies, you idiots.
You yuppie.
Yeah. On page 6, as they continue arguing with each other. Oh,
Wait,
go ahead.
on page 5, so that is like right off the bat a really good setting up bully as specifically bullying him for being Jewish. Like,
Yes, or at
like
the
I'm
very
surprised he didn't start throwing the quarters at
right,
him.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it is very much it's like right, like if anyone doesn't know, but some one way that people would do some anti-Semitic bullying would be throwing pennies and like being like,
Mhm.
"Oh, Jews, go fight for it,"
Yeah.
right? Like, aren't you going to go pick them up? You're going to take everything. And here, there's the kid being like, "You're so dumb. You're even doing your anti-Semitism wrong,"
Right.
basically, right? And on page 6, they decide as they're arguing to make a bet on who can get a high score on the game Paperboy, which is this the Paperboy that we used to play,
I mean,
Henry, you
it's
think?
a game. I mean, I think of it as a Game Boy game. I didn't know there was an arcade version of it.
I feel I wouldn't be surprised if there was,
Okay.
but yeah. So high score on Paperboy. Our bully continues to be anti-Semitic by calling Levi Goonstein. But Levi notes that if he wins the bet, then Clyde has to, quote, wear a yarmulke for a week.
That is amazing. That's
Yeah,
so good. I love the idea of like that's perfect sitcom setup of you have to wear a yarmulke like
right.
the bully, the anti-Semitic bully has to wear a yarmulke for a week.
100%. Yeah. So funny. We flash forward on page 19. The game never happens because Levi's dad pulls him away.
Mhm.
And on page 19, a grown-up Levi is returning home from service in Greenpeace. And his
He's
ride
definitely giving Andy Samberg vibes.
yes, he basically looks like it's like a self-insert for Andy
Yeah.
Samberg. And his ride, which seems to be an Uber of sorts, taking him from the airport, takes him by his old synagogue. But as he looks through, the synagogue is no longer a synagogue. It is now a combo drive-through Winchell Rallies. Winchell's being a donut store and Rallies being a supermarket. What an absurd
I
concept.
mean, you see it sometimes in like, you know, the west side of Chicago. You'll see like a church that was, with like a Jewish star on it in
Hmm.
Hebrew. It was once a
Makes
synagogue.
total sense.
So like,
The synagogue I worked at just bought a church that we're going to move into, and like the
uh,
church is becoming a
reverse.
synagogue. Yeah, reverse.
Yeah, but I don't think I've ever seen a synagogue that became a donut
No,
shop.
never, never. It's so silly.
I'm not
Um,
mad about it. I mean, I'm sad that poor synagogue, probably had to close, but uh,
well, it seems to be that the bully's not the only anti-Semitic one in town
right.
because the synagogue is closed, and as he mentions that, the driver actually forces him to get out of the car
Mhm,
pretty immediately and walk the rest of the
mhm,
way. So there's
mhm,
clearly anti-Semitism afoot.
mhm.
Levi returns home to his father, the bowler, and on page 26, his father invites Levi to Shabbat dinner down the road and lets Levi know it's your heritage, it's important, it's who you are. And on the next page, an aggravated Andy Samberg slash Levi uh, claims that he doesn't know who he is anymore. And he says that his dad always says that Judaism and bowling are his heritage. And his dad acknowledges some people aren't so keen on us Jews. On the next page, Levi is, basically saying he doesn't want this heritage that his dad claims is his. He says he doesn't even know how Judaism applies to his life,
Mhm,
which
mhm,
honestly, like, I hear it all the time from people I meet, right?
mhm,
And like, I think in some ways, the work of my life is trying to show them how it can apply.
mm, mm. By the way,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit
Oh,
about
yeah.
Flagg,
Please talk about
but
his father.
I mentioned that there are some panels where Levi looks just like Andy Samberg, or at least Andy
Hmm.
Samberg or Jace, but the panel on the top.
David, his father. Yeah.
Yeah, the panel on the top of 26 of David's father, that looks like Judd Hirsch from
Yes.
Taxi and The Fabelmans, and he was
Yeah.
amazing in The Fabelmans.
Yes,
Like, it looks like
so
that
good. He
character.
looks like that wild uncle from the Fablemans,
Yeah.
100%.
So
Yes.
maybe Andy Samberg, maybe he told the artist and they did it as
Who
a
knows? Yeah, but
as
yeah,
a
it's a very
mod.
Judd Hirsch looking guy. And on page 35 of this double-sized, extra-sized first issue, Levi's wandering around town and sees the old bowling alley, and he gets hunted down by a grown-up Clyde with some of his buddies who jump out and calls him Pizza Face Jew and Goonberg, and they keep making these terrible puns. But I love that Levi's response is, Clyde, is that anti-Semitism yours? Right? Like, just called, I'd recognize that anti-Semitism anywhere, you idiot, basically. That's it for Jewish content in this first issue. All we really have beyond is in the second issue when Levi is trying to set up, he's being hunted down by these anti-Semites. And on page 11 to 12 of the second issue, same creative team. Clyde and his other anti-Semitic goons are sneaking into a house, and we see a record playing and music notes coming out of it. And we find out that it's a record of Yentl that is playing. And Levi comes out dressed as as the bowler, smashing them and saying, "Poor Yentl, will she ever find love?" Which you can very much hear Andy Samberg saying, right?
Totally. Totally. And then like this is what's more villainous than this guy, he comes in and he smashes the record,
Yes,
the vinyl
yeah.
record, and says, "F this horse shit." Like, what an asshole.
Yeah, absolutely. No respect for Babs.
Oh,
For if anyone doesn't know, Yentl being the musical film with Barbara Streisand based on an
Mandy
Isaac Bashevis
Patinkin.
Singer story
Yeah.
about a woman who dresses up as a guy to go to yeshiva and do some Jewish learning. So even though our holy roller himself doesn't know where Judaism fits in with his life, we know Jed Hirsch appreciates Yentl at least.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's what we get from the holy roller, Henry. What do you?
So how many issues was it?
I think it was six.
So, this is sort of like the opposite. This is kind of like the Flag thing, where it's like you have all these issues and just a little tiny bit of Judaism. Sort of the opposite of Common Ground, in that you have one comic, or a few panels basically, and they pack in
Yeah.
so much. It's I enjoyed it. It was fun. I liked the Jewish content again. I think it's been a minute, so I wasn't so bogged down by like, another anti-Semitic Jewish content
Hmm.
thing. But there should be more. Like, there should be a follow-up to that conversation with his dad, and
Yeah, I was really disappointed that the
they
comic
should be
felt,
sitting at Shabbat dinner at the end. That
yes,
should be the final
right,
scene. Like,
yes, like
don't
despite,
leave that hanging.
right,
Like,
right, like it would be really lovely to see that, like now that like because he becomes a superhero with like a bowling ball that he fights with. So he's basically, he inherits one part of his heritage and tradition, the bowling aspect from his father. It would be nice to see him embrace the Judaism a bit more. And I mean, I get the sense from this that maybe Andy Samberg felt, oh, well, him fighting the anti-Semites is embracing his Judaism.
totally.
That's standing up for yourself. But yeah, I do wish that there was a bit more. I agree. Getting a follow, as I was reading, because I read all six issues, and as I'm reading and I'm getting to the next, I'm like, I just want some follow-up on that
Yeah.
Shabbat dinner so badly.
Yeah, I mean, that seemed like a perfect tee up for a final shot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even that pull-out shot of just shadows with like the candlesticks glowing or
Yeah,
something, and then
something like that would be
just so we know,
fantastic.
oh, he did go, and it's not just about the Shabbat dinner. It's about the resolution with his father.
Yes,
Like,
100%.
that's where it comes from. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe they bowl a game together, but yeah, it's maybe Marvel and DC does a better job at the Judaism than everyone else. If this is all we got, but Common Ground was pretty good.
I think that's like a pretty
Yeah,
solid, yeah, definitely
Uh,
Jewish content.
up there with some of the other best Jewish content
Yeah.
we've we've come across. Like going back all the way to Batwoman and the Kabbalah, but and I would say the other two are no worse than some of the lamest Jewish content we
Sure.
found.
Like at the very least, I don't think other than, even though it was weird to have the homing device, I don't think we've ever had him as a mention in a comic before. So it
Mhm.
was nice just to get a nod to
I think
something
we've
Jewish.
seen them, but
You've
like,
seen them
yeah,
maybe, it's funny. I've taught some of the things we've learned from our podcast now, and often when I show a Batwoman panel where she's walking to her home, and I'm asked people see like there's the panel that has the menorah and the Shabbos candles and the poster of the Sefirot, and people are always like, oh, and there's a mezuzah, and every time I look, I'm like, I really think that's just a light switch. I don't think that's a mezuzah. But they want to see
they
it once they're
wanted.
looking for Jewish stuff. So yeah, so maybe it's been in a panel, but I liked that we actually mentioned
Yeah.
the mezuzah. And, I was hopeful for some of the Jewish content and holy, like when I first started reading and there was that much in the first issue, I was very hopeful. And then it basically just becomes like a action-based ultra-violent story of him fighting these
It's like
Nazis.
kick
And
ass or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, fun to see that there's still Judaism in comics even outside the big two.
Yeah.
And as you said, we
And we
got
covered
one
over
great one.
like,
Yeah.
40 years or so. Like,
Yeah,
that's,
something from the 80s.
yeah.
I think we got comics from 85, from 2004 and from 2023.
It's
So
like all the generations of
yeah,
comics
pretty much.
basically in the modern era.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's more. If you know of any other independent Jewish comics, superhero comics that we missed, let us know. We'll be happy to tackle them. We'll be happy to tackle anything we find next. We do have more coming at you, but until we open up the page and bring you whatever we find next, I'm Brandon Bernstein.
I'm Henry Bernstein.
No
No relation.
relation.
Thanks for listening. You can follow us at Jewish Comics Pod on Facebook and Twitter, or you can email us at jewishcomicspodcast@gmail.com. Please don't forget to give us a rating, and you can hit the subscribe button if you haven't already.